Welcome to the podcast. I am excited today. We have a great guest. He's got one of the coolest names in the industry. His name is Cyrus Kazi, and he's going to tell us all about himself and where he came from and what he's doing. But Cyrus, really cool thing about Cyrus, he's the founder of a company called Quantibly that's doing some incredible things for companies that do incredible things for other people. So, Cyrus, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh. I really appreciate it, and thanks for that amazing intro. For your audience, I'm Cyrus Kazi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Quantibly. Quantibly is the first platform to operationalize impact data. What I mean by that is that every for-profit, not-for-profit governments, we are all dealing with impact data, social impact, environmental impact, health, education, but there are no unified systems that are designed just to capture and analyze and report this information. And we're the first platform to set up a framework, literally coded into it, that allows this broad scope impact data to be reported accurately. That's what we do. Quantibly was conceptualized and designed by this consulting company that we created years ago. It's called Lexington Advisory. So that's the brain trust behind Quantibly. And yeah, that's what we do.
So walk me through that. So where does the data live, like before maybe you get involved with a company? Like where does the data live before, and why is that a problem right now?
Sure. To answer that question, I have to kind of give you a little bit of background as to my background. So I have been involved with the nonprofit and for-profit industry for about 25, 26 years now. And Quantibly was born out of frustration because in various leadership roles, with absolutely brilliant organizations that I've worked with, the data resided in both structured and unstructured and semi-structured formats, sometimes on paper, sometimes on a spreadsheet. And as an executive, when I needed to make those decisions, those data-driven decisions, the data was few and far between, and it was random. It didn't tell a story, and we were collecting an unbelievable number of garbage data that didn't do any service. So from a strategic point of view, from a decision making point of view, that the data didn't serve the purpose. Before Quantibly, the data still, in most organizations, data resides in a wide range of systems, and sometimes the institutional knowledge, the human intellect, the intellectual capital is not digitized. With turnover, with organizational changes, that data is gone. So Quantibly is a kind of like a central nervous system, an operating system to tie that all so that you're constantly churning in more and more data for your business decision making, effective impact, efficiency, and all of those beautiful words that we care about. So born out of frustration, we're still solving that problem in terms of data discrepancy, if you will, and we're trying to consolidate and sanitize all the impact data within an organization.
So this is great, but help me understand a little bit more. Like if you're a sales organization, your data is going to be your CRM. You're going to have all these conversations going on, proposals, history, all that with a CRM. Manufacturer, you're going to have an ERP. It's going to have all your raw material, inventory, your order information, shipping, all that stuff in there. If you're a nonprofit or a company like what you're helping, what does that data look like? In other words, what kind of data is up for risk of being lost if someone doesn't keep good records?
So, great question. Nonprofit data is not very different from the for-profit data. Nonprofits also deal with sales and fundraising and products and programs and everything in between. The added layer that we kind of see in the nonprofit sector is the reporting, the compliance aspect, because almost all not-for-profits have to report to multiple stakeholders. Even not-for-profits, they use ERPs and CRMs, and truth be told, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but for the last 20, 25 years, the CRM and the ERP world has seduced the nonprofit executives too, and for-profit too, that this is the end-all be-all kind of solution. It's a glorified spreadsheet. It's a ledger of every interaction. But what does it mean to talk to if you're talking to an executive, or if a not-for-profit, you're talking to a potential donor, how many interaction you had with the donor is not an indicator of if that person is committed to your cause. Just the way if you're collecting all this information. So you need more, I want to say, human intelligence behind those data points. So for not-for-profits, it's also very similar problems when they're dealing with supply chain, board and governance, and finance, and accounting, and audits, and all of this. This data integration currently is completely broken, especially in the nonprofit sector, I want to say, because A, they don't have the resources and technology, and second, they don't even know where to begin, because the tech is kind of second.
Yeah. Can I add a third there? It's that probably it's an industry that's just overlooked. It's 100%. When you're developing a data solution, you're probably not thinking, I'm gonna take this to all the nonprofits, right? And so they probably weren't paid attention to by the big data solutions of the world.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So, which makes Quantibly interesting in a sense that we saw this exact problem, that CRMs and ERPs are being handed down as a discounted product for tax benefits to companies, to not-for-profits who are doing similar, great work. It's not purpose-built. So we wanted to create a purpose-built solution that does not look and feel like the traditional CRMs and ERPs, if that makes any sense. And truth be told, the CRM and the ERP is kind of dying out. In the next 3 to 5 years, the CRMs and ERPs as we know it is going to die out. That's a fact. And so we wanted to kind of be a little bit more futuristic. We wanted to build a platform so that it allows beyond just garbage in, garbage out kind of data that most CRMs and ERPs have. So yeah, that's the major integration challenges that we see, very much akin to the for-profit sector.
Well, very cool. I want to scrap my plans here. I want to just see a demo now of this. It's really cool. But I'm glad you came on today. Thank you so much for joining. Really, what we wanted to do is pick your brain a little bit, because we wanted to discuss what we're seeing as like the 3 biggest trends that's driving SaaS integration in 2025.
Right.
And the first one that we identified was an AI-driven integration and this intelligent automation that's happening, where these systems are pulling together multiple data sources and other AI tools to develop systems and do the analysis to provide recommendations and even the solution at the end of this as well. But it's tying this together, and we're just I'm seeing that pop up. I think the last number I saw was I think I had a stat here. By 2028, 33% of enterprise software applications will include agentic AI, up from less than 1% in 2024. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
What I'm about to say is probably not going to go very well with your audience, especially the AI folks. We call it data theater, and meaning the current avalanche of AI tools and products, just like a decade ago when companies were selling dashboards to executives, we are actually overselling what AI can do to companies, and without addressing the fundamental problem. And the problem is that AI is as good as the data that you enter, right? Or the data that you use to train the model. So agentic AI can only produce certain results, certain information, if it has sanitized real important data. So from a nonprofit context, and to a certain degree many for-profit industries too, they don't have a data strategy. So layering an agentic AI on top of garbage data doesn't necessarily produce insightful information for the things that you need. You have just added a very shiny object. It's the shiny object paradox, right? So whether you can use it or not, it's pointless. So everyone is talking about AI integration, and internally, whenever our clients come to us and say, hey, how can we use Quantibly's AI? And we have a multi-agent solution. The first thing we say, forget about all of this. First, talk to us about your data strategy. What data are you collecting? How do you plan to use it? Who's your audience? How do you see this data growing? for your organization. Only then we will start to train your model instead of dumping everything in a big basket and hoping it sticks. Automation, on the other hand, yes, there are automation that is absolutely important, and bunch of tools that have come around to faster grant writing, communication tools, and all of that. That's great. But mind you, again, if my agentic AI is writing a grant proposal in 5 minutes that used to take three weeks, that grant proposal is either generic, it's not personalized for a particular donor, or it's learning from the data that I have fed into the model. So again, automation, do things faster. It's more of like the distinction between efficiency and effectiveness, right? You're doing things fast, but are they right? That's the question
Right.
here. This is the conversation kind of we are having internally, and sometimes it's an unpopular opinion because everyone loves AI. So do I, don't take me wrong. But I think that the trend is actually getting skewed, and it's not addressing the real problem, which is the data sanitization.
Yeah, that's true. The whole time that you were talking about that, it reminded me of, love him or hate him, but there's an Elon Musk quote where he's standing on the deck of a SpaceX rocket in his background, and he's describing the design process. Have you seen this video?
I
Where he
think I
says,
have.
he goes, how you build something is how you build everything. It's basically, you have to design the requirements, then you have to engineer the process, and then you have to remove steps from that process because you don't need them. Then you have to optimize, is the fourth step, and then once you do that, you automate it. So, or the 100%. AI piece of it. And he said, what he said, he's like, I have done everything backwards. I have done every step before the last. I've automated stuff that wasn't optimized. I've optimized this process that shouldn't even be there. I've optimized or, design processes that shouldn't even been in the requirements. And so he's like, I've done everything wrong, everything backwards. So I think what you're saying.
Well, it must be nice to be the richest man in the world so that he has room for failures and experiments, right? But that is not the case for companies who can jump into automation.
His failures are kind of epic. That's kind of true. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, you're so true though. We can't just throw in AI integration into a system that's full of garbage, because it'll just make it 10 times worse, probably. And that's a great point. Okay. All right, let's see if we can destroy the next trend as well. All right, unified data platforms and iPaaS solutions. So the prevalence of what we're seeing in this space. So what are your thoughts on this? I think basically I think what we noted here was that the companies are using like 250 plus SaaS applications, and departments have something like 60 to 80 tools each that they're all rolling out and deploying, probably in a vacuum, probably not integrated, probably not part of the enterprise data strategy or policy. And I'm just kind of curious, like how your company specifically, the platform you use, connects all these things like donor management, financial tools, program tracking, and what's the financial impact on all those things, and how a unified data platform is addressing those issues.
Sure. Depending on the size of the organization, you're absolutely spot on. The organizations, even for-profit companies, I have seen between 11 to 20 applications in just one department, and times 5, and each one is doing a specific function. So it has created in the background. It's the engineers lovingly call it the spaghetti architecture, right? Again, over the course of last couple of decades, the tendency has been hey, let's seduce these customers, give them tools that does one thing and one thing really well, which works. However, in the nonprofit sector, we're seeing kind of 4-step changes. The first one was kind of digitization of information. That's like late 90s and then going into the early 2000s. And then we started seeing integration processes, because now companies are saying, okay, I need my accounting to talk to my donor management, so to speak, right? But now the stage that we're in, which was inevitable in many ways, is consolidation of those tools, because again, it's not possible. They're not designed that way to talk to each other. They're not designed to optimize your process. They're designed to optimize their money, right? So the more seats they sell you, the better off they are. They're not there to kind of make your life easier, so to speak. And we started looking at this, and when we sat down to kind of design and build Quantibly, the initial mission was to transform and this entire sector. And I said, okay, before we get there, let's figure out how to integrate this. Let's think about what can we do to make this effective, efficient, and actually purpose-built. And we started thinking of a hub and spoke model, because fundamentally, organizations don't make, the players within the organizations don't make decisions separately. A board chair making a decision has an implication for the CEO making decisions for the finance, CFO making decisions that has implications for the fundraising team, and so on and so forth. So how do we map that? How do we map that decision point so that everyone has access to relevant data? What we created is what IBM used to call it back in the 80s. It's called an organizational management system. So it's not siloed decision points, siloed decision making. It's not a tool. It's much more than a tool. It's like an operating system for your entire organization. That's how we started unifying data. That's the number one. And number two, we've kind of played out every single user scenario, like a cognitive mapping. This is how a CEO makes decisions every day. So these are the data that is relevant to a CEO, for example. Let's then figure out kind of what kind of data we need to ingest to show the CEO X, Y, and Z data. Now we move on to COO and CFO and Chief Fundraising Officer, all of that, right? So beyond just systems, we also started looking at people-centric design, that these are information relevant to this particular type of user within the organization. And that's how we built it. That's how we unified it. Creating a form for data entry and surfacing a nice little pie chart, that's like child's play, honestly. You can do that in a spreadsheet. It's what do you mean by that is the story behind the data is what we try to pull, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. OMS, Organizational Management System. Obviously, I've only heard that term from an order management perspective, but in organizational management, you say in the 80s, IBM had that terminology?
I think IBM came up in a case study, if I remember. I'm remembering this vaguely. IBM coined the term in 1988, 89-ish. This is right before the tech boom happened. IBM was talking about that decision making is centralized, but data is not, right? In large hierarchical organization, and that they came up with this terminology, and I kind of remember this my college years. I was reading that. I was like, that's interesting. That's actually true. Decisions are centralized in many ways. So that's how we kind of designed Quantibly in that fashion, if you will.
Got it. Yeah, one of the things, I worked for a company that we were acquired by IBM, and one of the hardest parts of that transition had to do moving from Microsoft Outlook to Lotus Notes. and as an end user, I'm using Lotus Notes, and it's just like, it's the most over-engineered, not user-friendly email system. But the more I actually got to know Lotus Notes and how it functions and works, it's like an incredible OMS, like organization, because it had all this ability for me to pull in data and create data models and structure and share things in a way that was literally, it was like a data sharing tool, but just it had an email attached to it.
Yep.
So, I haven't used Lotus Notes in over a decade or two, but I'd love to I wonder if that was kind of what they were trying to do to introduce the OMS concept a bit more by making that acquisition. But yeah, I'm not sure, because it definitely had that style to it.
Yeah. So I think one of the trends that we're definitely seeing is that the point-to-point integrations are going to start going away. But even today, I know a lot of companies are still doing these one-offs because they have to get it live, and we've got to get these two systems talking. So let's just do this now, and then someday we'll figure out a better strategy. Are you seeing some companies moving toward that centralized strategy, that unified data platform, or are they still just thinking point to point.
You're absolutely spot on. And the trend is very similar to in the not-for-profit world. They're still playing with the point-to-point connection integration and just a little bit of automation here and there, and they're being wowed by that. I cannot speak for other not-for-profits, but the ones that are using Quantibly, from day one, they see the unified approach. From day one, they see the data quality, that how we have built in best practices. So you cannot just automatically import rubbish into the system. And then only then they see automation and how the time savings. I mean, I use this example all the time. I was working with a government agency in the South, and there's this federal government report that takes them about, I want to say, not my words, he said between a month and a half to 2 months that takes them to collect all the data. It's an 80-page report that they have to submit to the government. And as he was describing the process, I was showing a demo. I showed that entire 75-page report generated in our system in like 30 seconds with every single data point verified coming from all across the state. And he was quite literally, I mean, he thought it was like I was just pulling a fast one. And I said, no, this is literally how the algorithm works. This is the kind of automation you get after you have done a statewide data consolidation, right? So you're not waiting for 6 weeks to 8 weeks. You're looking at 30 seconds. And then you get to see how the data is verified. And if there's a red flag, our system is telling you, hey, we cannot verify this data. Now you're picking up the phone call, calling one of the government contractors and say, what gives, because this data is not making sense. So there's a compliance aspect. There is kind of accountability aspect. Those are built in. One-to-one data connections are not supposed to do that. They're not meant for that, right?
Yeah.
And the important part is that when you do this, the smart systems start to recognize patterns and learn from your system. They're adaptive. Again, the one-to-one point solutions are not designed for learning and adaptation to your organization needs.
Got it. All right. I think that it leads us to the last point here. The third trend that we're seeing in the space is that vertical SaaS and industry specific integrations are becoming much more. Enter Quantibly, right? You actually found a niche that was underserved with massive data requirements and needs in that space. And we're probably seeing in other industries as well. We're moving from this one size fits all model of data integration to very industry specific, because there's different types of industry like forums that we would attach to, or industry data that we're going to download and use. And retailers use a lot of consolidated and syndicated data that they pull together in some of their SKUs. But I'm sure that's the same way across multiple industries as well. I know automotive has a lot of that. So this is kind of why these generic BI tools don't really work for impact measurement on anything that we're doing, especially around nonprofit. But I think one of the unique challenges that we found in the trend was that integration with grant management and like volunteer tracking and compliance systems. This has to be beyond what some of the out of the box capabilities can bring to the table. Is that your belief as well?
100%. CRMs, ERPs, even generic BI tools, they assume this linear relationship between the customer journey and the revenue attribution. The reality is not that, period. And there's so many nuances. And until we design Quantibly, and I take mighty pride in this, I did not see any solution that is talking about the nuances that are applicable for nonprofits. I mean, how many applications can you think of that can track longitudinal outcome tracking over the course of 3 years, 5 years? None. And impact is messy. Impact is complicated. It's not just, a cause and effect relationship sometimes. And most of the time, this companies, nonprofit and for-profit, they don't even see the impact after many years. So you have to look at the entirety of the data and the journey. And the BI tools and the SaaS products I often encounter are not designed for that. The vertical SaaS makes sense, especially for the nonprofit sector, is because then it has the industry knowledge. We can adapt to the changing rules within the system. So, for example, in Quantibly, we have the fundraising grant management tools that is also connected to compliance. But in a typical solution, there's two different systems, right? And most likely, multiple layers and layers of API connections happening. So same with volunteer management. So when volunteers are contributing their valuable time and resources, we're not just tracking their information, their personal information. We are also tracking their in-kind contribution that is pushing into the audit, that's pushing into the balance sheet, essentially, right? And income statements. So that's the level of sophistication and connection that we have built into our vertical SaaS. And because we're industry specific, the beauty of Quantibly has always been that even though we are primarily targeted for nonprofits, NGOs, and what have you, the same methodology, the same framework can be applied to for-profit industries as well. And that's what we are heading, that's where we're pivoting slowly. That's been our learning, that the typical BI tools, the data theater, as I mentioned, it looked good, but it's not helpful. It doesn't necessarily advance the mission or the impact that companies are trying to.
Yeah. And you probably see this as well. The amount of micro SaaS solutions that are getting avalanched into the market is just continuing. The volume is just continually increasing. And that's probably not going to go away. They're very profitable. They're very useful in their niche segment. So the ability to integrate to all this new stuff is not going to be handled from point to point integration. It's going to have to be handled in a way that it's much more controlled and by a platform designed for that industry.
I agree, but I also think that post-COVID world, the SaaS as a business model is old. It's dying out in a sense that whenever I talk to executives, nonprofit or for-profit, there has been a bit of a feature fatigue, if you will. Every tool, every micro SaaS that is coming out, and they're like, okay, it's just so many bells and whistles, but is it helping me? I'm just adding more and more to the tech stack, right? So that's
a great point. Yeah.
And the second aspect that, at least in quiet circles, I'm seeing that we don't own this anymore. These are all rented. So there is an ownership existential question that's coming up. Many executives that 2 decades ago, I had a server room. Now I rent my information, and they monetize it, right? So I was talking to an energy company, and they have a CSR, corporate social responsibility program, and they have the same idea. They have multiple SaaS products they're using, and they don't own any of that. And when they started talking to us, and we pitched our solution because we actually make sure that you own the data, not us, at any given time. That's why he was talking to us, and he was like, no one has ever told me this. I want to own my data. You guys are the only people who are offering me to set up a system within Quantibly's framework that I can actually own the data. So I think as we push more towards data and privacy globally, the standards, if you will, as we go beyond just add more feature, these micro SaaS products are also going to either consolidate or they're going to fizzle out. We'll see.
Very interesting point. In my last industry, we work with a lot of law enforcement agencies, and I learned a lot about the body cams that most law enforcement offices the funding's been approved. Everyone sees the value. Let's have these body cams. So these cameras cost whatever a camera costs, but that's not where the money is in those agreements. It's the data. So the data, terabytes of video that gets captured, actually gets put up into that company's farm in their cloud. That data is then sold back. So it's the data, it's it's whatever you're capturing in that circumstance. So that was like a big eye opener for me about, this big change now. Data doesn't really reside within your server room. It's actually rented back to you from these companies, which does change the way you think about integration and even concerns about what if these companies go out of business? How's that going to impact me? And the ownership changes. Yeah. So good point. Okay. Rapid fire section. Couple questions for you here. If I'm a leader within a nonprofit what are the top 2 questions that I need to ask my SaaS vendors about integration before I move forward with it?
At the risk of sounding a broken record, and in other podcasts I've said the same thing. If you're a nonprofit executive and you're feeling a lot of pressure to automate, to jump into this AI bandwagon, great. That means you're thinking in the right terms. But start with your most painful processes. If your process isn't right, if you're not collecting the right data, then AI is going to be a very expensive mistake. And you don't want that. The second thing is that focus on integration. A lot of tendencies for not-for-profit executives I see is that let's connect everything quickly. Follow through the thread, as in like, if I connect one system to the other, what does the data lifecycle look like? I would rather have 3 solid connections than 10 isolated ones, right? So instead of trying to connect every system to everything, follow the data and build your integration plan accordingly. And I want to say, as I mentioned this earlier, the CRMs and ERPs are kind of linear applications. Build your strategy around how you're engaging with your audience, your customers, your donors, the public, right? What is that data that you need to collect from them and they need to see from you? Only then, and a software is just a tool. A software is not going to fix the message for you. So only then find the applications that can help you get the data and present the data for X, Y, and Z purposes. Purposeful integration, follow through the life cycle of the integration before you start connecting everything to everything, and focus on the process.
Okay. All right. Biggest mistake, most common integration error that you see companies are making.
The shiny object principle. Just as soon as the biggest mistake that I have been seeing in the last year or so is that, can you do this faster? Or can your application write a grant proposal in 5 hours? Our application can write a grant proposal in 5 minutes. That's not a problem here. So it's efficiency or effectiveness. And sometimes they're not mutually exclusive. And getting the not-for-profits to understand that faster doesn't always mean better. You need to focus on the quality of the work that you're doing. The biggest mistake is that. Second, and this is probably one of the core reasons why we exist, is that nonprofits have gotten used to reporting activities, not outcomes, not impact. And even now, when they're talking to our system, and our system is asking them, what is your impact? What is the end goal here? They're still trying to figure out, how do we go beyond activity reporting? I'll give you a quick example and make sense.
Repeat that.
A
really
lot of
quick,
organizations,
if you don't mind, that question.
no, saying that, sure. A lot of organizations have gotten used to reporting their activities, not outcomes. And outcomes are difficult. Outcomes are difficult to report and capture and all of that. So when they're talking to our system, when they're talking to us, they're saying, how do I report these activities? And our first reaction is, we're not designed for activities. Yes, activities are important, but that is not your reporting data points. We report outcomes and impact long-term. So the biggest challenge that I see is that, hey, I want to enter this data. Is it going to show me what activities I have done? The aggregate of all the things. One good example I always use, if you go to this very prominent organization in New York City, the United Way of New York City, if you go to their website, and there's a tab that says impact. If you click on that impact, you'll see activities being reported as impact. I love United Way of New York City. Don't tell me wrong. They're my former employer. Love them. Great organization, but come on, right? You providing 2,000 Uber rides to people is not an outcome. It's just something that you've done. It's an activity. So that's the second challenge that I see in terms of organizations making the decision. And the last thing is that nonprofits have always been told that, well, we don't have the money. We love the tech. We don't have the money. Meanwhile, they're spending an absurd 10, 20%, 30% of their tech budget on a bunch of tools that really don't do very well. So the mindset has to change. So before you go into AI and integration, think of effectively using the donor dollars to build your infrastructure as opposed to buying a tool. It's a completely different thinking process, if you will. And there is a bit of cognitive dissonance there among the for-profit executives that I talk to. No criticism there. I mean, it's okay. It's common. But I think the challenge is from that perspective that, oh my God, if I buy more tech, then I will be effective, I'll be better, I'll be more efficient. But that is not the case.
Future predictions, Cyrus. One bold prediction about SaaS integration.
SaaS is a business model. I think more and more companies, and I know we are looking into usage-based as opposed to just pure subscription. The competitive advantage is going to be for SaaS companies that can democratize data ownership, and they're not trying to monetize and, sell people's data. I think that is going to be a big thing, future trend. Blockchain has done some incredible, blockchain technology has been kind of implemented for data privacy security, which is great, but it's not widespread. I see more and more blockchain implementation to protect people's data. A lot of organizations that I talk to deal with PHI, health information for, lots of populations. And they're just depending on the old school encryption and always at risk. And this is a constant worry. So I see a future where the data is democratized, that is owned by these organizations and is very secure. And I also think that in terms of AI and integration within the SaaS model, more and more companies are going to go for multi-agent solutions that specializes in a specific task as opposed to one agent doing all of it. I see that to be a trend, at least in from my target market, not-for-profits and NGOs.
Roger that. So, Cyrus, tell us where we can learn more about Quantibly.
You can always connect with me, quantibly.com. You can go there. We are not a typical tech company. We are a really group of diverse individuals from different sectors, but we are impact focused. Reach out to us, talk to us, give us ideas as to how we can do better. My LinkedIn is always open. Connect with me or just drop me a note.
Fantastic. So any listeners out there, data is not slowing down, right? It's accelerating. The way that it's coming into your organizations is diverse and changing and probably a little bit out of control. So definitely encourage you to evaluate your current integration strategy, how this data is living and working together and how it's best serving you, not to just track activities, but really focus on outcomes on what you're doing within your organization. Any final thoughts?
My final thought to the nonprofits out there is that there's a whole world beyond your CRM and spreadsheets. Talk to us. We can help with your data strategy as well as your data architecture, and you'll be surprised what you can achieve.
Well said. All right. Thank you so much, Cyrus.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Josh.